What's up, everybody? Welcome to Garage Geopolitics. My name is Matt Livers, and we are on episode 17, which is all about cluster munitions. Now, cluster munitions are also known as cluster bombs, and recently in the news, we're seeing a transaction take place between the United States and Ukraine with munitions that fall into this cluster category. So, we're going to talk about what cluster munitions are, the exchange itself between the United States and Ukraine, as well as the implications of cluster munitions, not only in Ukraine and the Russian conflict, but kind of overall as far as how these types of weapons impact our planet. So let's go ahead and get to it. First off, what is a cluster munition? Typically, we have an understanding of what a cluster bomb is. And so a munition or a bomb is dropped from a drone, airplane, whatever. It is then hones in on its target. Before it gets to its target, it opens up and these little bomblets fall out. Essentially, little hand grenades fall out of these casings, and then they cover the target with these different bomblets. This can also be done with projectiles like we see here through artillery, and so you have these little hand grenades essentially inside these artillery shells. Once they get to a certain altitude, they open up and then it spreads all over the target. Now, right away, some of you may be thinking, well, this isn't a very good way to specifically take out one target. It kind of covers a whole area, which if you are using it in a densely urban area, you can find yourself into a spot where you're injuring civilian casualties. So that's what cluster munitions are all about. So the U.S. stockpile, we have a ton of these cluster munitions. In March of 2023, a letter from the House of Senate Republicans to Biden administration said the U.S. has as many as 3 million cluster munitions that are available to use for trade or within different conflicts that we deem necessary. That's a lot of bombs. Now, the the Department of Defense has a position on these cluster munitions, and that we're slowly trying to work ourselves away from it. What I mean by slowly working our way away from it, we are still using cluster munitions for transactions and or trade, but we are not trying to use them ourselves. One of the requirements that the U.S. State Department or our government has is that munitions or cluster munitions need to have a 1% failure rate within these bomblets. Now that maybe sound a little confusing. I'm going to go back to my image here to help out. So let's say that these bomblets, there's 100 of them. Let's just say there's 100 in each of these bombs. The State Department or the Department of Defense is wanting a failure rate of 1% or less. So when these bomblets sprinkle its target, they only want one of the 100 to not detonate. Now that's a pretty tall order. We don't know exactly how all these things function. Once they are in the air, they might detonate at certain times, or they might not detonate at all upon impact, which we find ourselves getting into deeper problems later down the road. So our government is now saying, well, we don't want to use cluster munitions, but if we do, they need to have a 1% failure rate as far as 1% of the bomblets need to not go off. We are using these weapons, we are giving these weapons to the Ukrainians to use in their own country to stop the spread of the Russian forces. So the current event that we saw with these cluster munitions, the Ukrainians are using these against Russian soldiers. This is kind of a unique situation. When the United States has used cluster munitions in the past, we've been using them on an enemy target within a certain area. It could be Cambodia, could be Iraq, could be Vietnam, could be any of the different conflicts that the United States have been in. But this situation, the Ukrainians are actually asking for these cluster munitions to use on their own soil against the Russian military. And so it's a little bit different than us using it or giving it to a country to use on another country's military. A little bit of sushi. The implications for this kind of got into it with those bomblets not exploding, but the unexploded submunitions may remain dangerous for decades. According to the Cluster Munitions Monitor of 2022, at least 23,082 people, cluster munition casualties, have been confirmed globally. Now, there are a lot of conflicts where these were used around the world, not just by the United States, but by other countries as well. But these casualties take place after the conflict has finished. These munitions lay in the ground for long periods of time until someone unfortunately finds them. About 18,426 casualties resulted from unexploded submunitions from about 4,000 different munition attacks. Sorry, my dog's making some noise. Just hold up, we're almost done. And so this is one of the implications. We're using these weapons, we're having these bomblets not going off when we're designating them to, and so they're causing problems for people down the road. Now this map's kind of hard to see on my screen, but this is a map of countries that have come out and said that they will not use cluster munitions around the world. The countries that are in purple have ratified the document, and the country in that turquoise-ish color have not only ratified it, but signed documents saying that they will not use cluster munitions in military conflicts. So this is kind of the global scope as far as how they feel, or how our planet feels about cluster munitions. There's a fair amount of the world that doesn't even want to entertain the idea of using it. With that being said, these are the countries that are still being impacted today by undetonated cluster munitions. Now this is just a handful of the ones that I found on Wikipedia this afternoon, but there are a bunch of countries that are still dealing with unexploded munitions from these different conflicts, which can be a big problem for the civilian populations trying to recover from these conflicts. That's all that I have for us today. I want to go back and end up on our episode page, see if that works out for these episodes. Please leave me a comment, question, or thoughts on my video. If you have anything that you'd like to share, I know cluster munitions is not the most engaging topic, but it is kind of interesting. Please, if you want to get crazy, hit that subscribe button or the like button, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day.